Hey there, and welcome to the Food as Medicine Show with Dr. Ann, the place to be for real talk with real people and real results so you can heal yourself naturally. I'm your host, Dr. Ann, and I'm a board-certified pharmacist and health coach specializing in treating cholesterol without medications. You can learn more about me at drann.com, spelled A-N-H, as in helpful. I always spell it out since people usually forget the silent H at the end, and I want you to be able to find me. And I'm hoping by episode 30 or so that I won't have to spell it out for you, because I'm really running out of words that start with H. Today, I want to give a big shout out to Miami 1111. Thanks for your comment about us not using big words on the show. We'll try to keep doing that in the future. Thanks to Slow Growth, Carrie G, There Is Only One, and Antoine0189, who happens to be my baby brother, who's getting married in 2 months. Thanks so much to you guys for leaving a review of the Food as Medicine Show. Your listens and your reviews matter, because that's what helps keep boosting us in the rankings and helps more people find the show so they can hear the Food as Medicine message. We appreciate the feedback and appreciate you for tuning in. So remember to subscribe to the show and you'll never miss an episode. After today's episode, take a minute to leave a review in iTunes by searching for the Food as Medicine Show. Let us know what you think and tell us where you're from, because we really want to know, and we'll give you a shout out. 1 or 2 sentences will do, and it'll help us improve the show. I want to let you know that the opinions expressed on this show may not represent my opinions, and the show is for general information only, not a substitute for medical care. So prior to beginning any new health program, I recommend you consult with a qualified health professional. Today, I chat with Jeff Robbins, who has been a pharmacist for over 25 years, is an advanced fellow of the American College of Anti-Aging and Functional Medicine, and just an overall cool guy who likes to forage for mushrooms in his spare time. In today's episode, Jeff and I talk about an agoraphobic patient he helped who had not left her house in 3 months, and her sister literally had to blindfold her to take her to the appointment. And within 3 weeks of changing her diet, she was out of the house, driving on her own, and coming off of her psychiatric medications. How he got started as a pharmacist who does not like drugs. The top 5 foods most people are sensitive to. The 2 diets that he recommends for weight loss and optimum health. What leaky gut syndrome is and why it causes arthritis, asthma, fibromyalgia, and many other conditions. What kind of detox program you need to do if you hit a weight loss plateau, and much, much more. All right, let's go chat with Jeff. Today we have a special guest, and his name is Jeff Robbins. Jeff is first and foremost a loving husband to his wife Stacy and father to his daughters Natalie and Lauren. He has been a compounding pharmacist for 20 years and likes to think of himself as the pharmacist who doesn't like drugs, which I love. Jeff owns Essential Wellness Pharmacy and is an owner of Optimum Health Solutions, which is a company that brings wellness to the corporate workplace. And Jeff was recently awarded by his peers the prestigious National ELAN Award for the most innovative pharmacy practice. And he was also recently won the Mankind Project's 7 Generations Award, which is an award for living one's mission in life to affect 7 generations, which is pretty incredible. Jeff recently passed his boards and is an advanced fellow with the American College of Anti-Aging and Functional Medicine through the University of Southern Florida. Jeff is a regional and national speaker. He is passionate about educating people and giving them the chance to make more informed decisions about their health and health care. He is a compassionate listener and has spent countless hours with physicians and patients, educating them on healthy alternatives for menopause, but he always practices what he preaches. Jeff takes time for himself and his family, and they are on his team. Welcome, Jeff, to the show.
Oh, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you. Well, I just want to dive right in, and I'm really curious, Jeff, about how you got started and how you became the pharmacist who doesn't like drugs.
Yeah, I graduated about 25 years ago, a long time ago, and And I realized pretty quickly I started working for a chain, which is a very important job, as you know. But what I realized really quick for myself was that I was this little tiny cog in this big illness machine, and that if in essence, if people stayed sick, everybody made money. And I thought, gosh, that's not why I went to school. I really thought we were going to help people get well, but we really weren't doing much about people with anxiety and depression, or we weren't really, consulting people about their high blood pressure and their hyperlipidemia and things like that. So, I thought, gosh, I don't think I'm going to be able to do this for the next 30 years, So I decided to go back to school, and that's actually, I started my postgraduate studying the second year after I was out of college, and it's been now, a career-long process of learning. So it's really been wonderful.
Yeah, I hear you. It's kind of the same journey that I've been on is, I see patients on 20 meds or so a month, and I'm really thinking to myself, what are we doing for them? Or is adding another medication really going to help them? And in my opinion, it's not. We really have to find the crux of the issue and, and help them change the behaviors that's going to get them better. So I love it. I love what you're doing, and and I agree with you. It's a continuous process. It's just, one of the reasons we got into pharmacy, I think, is because we like to learn. So we're always continuing our education. So I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing with us some of your insights.
Oh, you bet. And the data, as you know, is just streaming out now, and so there's so much to keep up with, but it's so interesting to do that. We're finding better and better ways to assist patients to co-create basically a healthy lifestyle for themselves, and it's it's far more than just doing counseling on penicillin and blood pressure medication.
I love that word, co-creation. It just it kind of gets to the essence of what we're trying to do. Is we're partnering with them. We're not speaking above them, but we're right next to them, helping them along.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, okay, on your website you said that one of the things that you do is, you help patients optimize their health because there's changes in our food supply and food quality that have affected our health today. Can you elaborate more on these changes?
Well, the data is pretty clear. Depending on who you read, by the time, food gets to our supermarkets, if it's mass-produced food, because of a couple of different reasons. One, we've been, farming the same soil for a couple of hundred years in many cases, and also because of the long transit time that our food takes. Most of our food, I live in the Midwest, most of our food comes from Southern California, Central and Southern America. So, the food that ends up in our grocery markets could have been traveling for a couple of weeks. And the data, like I said, is pretty clear that the food is about 40% less nutritious than it used to be in the 50s when, more food was really grown locally, or it was canned locally, or it was canned by the family. It was done right away as it was fresh, and they trapped in those nutrients. So, I'll see, patients that eat very well, but they'll often show up in many ways. If we do testing, their bodies will come back toxic or, incomplete in their nutritional needs, even though they're eating well. And so we really try and take a look at, not only what the person's eating, but also how do we supplement what that person is doing as far as food is concerned, not only just with nutrition, but also with, supplements, how they cook their food, if they eat any raw food, what type of things they drink, and put that all together in a package of, what's actually getting absorbed. The old saying is, you are what you eat. But really, you are what you absorb, and so we want to make sure that that our patients have the nutrients available, to their GI tract to actually get absorbed and get into the body.
So, what was that test that you were talking about, where patients can go and figure out if they're absorbing the food and if there's toxins presenting in their body?
Well, we use a few different tests. One is SpectraCell, where we can SpectraCell test, where you can actually check for their nutrient levels, and you can check vitamins. We also use Metametrics, and we can look and see how their omega-3 fatty acids are being absorbed. We can see how their body's making other essential acids and fatty acids. So there's a lot of different ways of testing. And then the other big one that we haven't talked about yet, but we also check and look for food sensitivities.
Yeah,
and
that's a big issue nowadays.
Oh my gosh, and I've been doing it for probably 7 or 8 years, and I start with all my patients with gut health, a combination of gut health and nutritional intake, and we just kind of go from there,
So, you were talking about, food quality and the supply, the nutrients being about 40% less than what they are. So what do you recommend patients do? Do they eat more? Do they buy organic? What do you suggest?
Yeah, well, both of those things are fine. Certainly, I like a certain percentage of a person's food to be raw if it can. And it doesn't have to be 90% raw, but somewhere 30 to 50% raw if they can. Organic, of course, I really believe in organic food, not only simply because there's no herbicides and pesticides in there, but also that most organic farmers use natural fertilizers and understand the process of putting nutrients back in the soil, because if it's not, I'm from a farming family, so we've farmed for 6 or 7 generations, and I know the typical farmer uses some ammonium and some nitrogen and a few other things, but we're not putting like trace minerals back in. If you think about the stories when the Pilgrims came over and they saw the Native Americans and they put a piece of corn in the ground, and then they put a piece of fish on top of the corn, that's putting nutrients back in the ground, right? In that fish there's going to be selenium and boron and molybdenum and all the trace minerals that our bodies need. And so that's what we really watch for, is the quality of that food, because if you look at just take selenium, there's great swaths of American soil and Canadian soil that there's no selenium left in the ground soil. And my town in Peoria, Illinois, we're right in the middle of one of those swaths. And so even if you get a locally grown organic tomato that's a real tomato that's beautiful and red, there's no selenium left in it. Wow. And we need selenium for our thyroid to work well, for our adrenal glands to work well. It's a trace mineral, but it's very, very important. And so those are the things that we really watch out for, because, like I said, I can't tell you how many times I've had vegetarian or vegan patients come in, and we do some checking on their nutritional deficiencies, and lo and behold, not only are they nutritionally deficient, but oftentimes their thyroids are going to be subfunctioning, their livers are going to be subfunctioning because they're not getting the things that they actually need from their food sources.
Okay, so you're saying eat raw, and then to eat organic when possible, and then potentially even supplementing, because even with those two things, we might not be providing the nutrients and the micronutrients that we need.
Yes, and one of the big ones is don't forget protein. And I don't care where you get your protein from. This is one of the problems I run into with a lot of my vegan patients, is that protein, of course we know that protein becomes muscle and can help heal wounds and things like that, but the two places where I really try and stress for my patients where proteins are really used, the proteins that we eat, our body breaks those down into amino acids, and they'll reformulate those proteins and those amino acids into one that's very important, is neurotransmitters. So, for patients that, that come in and they're anxious or they're depressed or they have ADD, one of the first things we look at is their protein intake, because their body's going to make those neurotransmitters out of those proteins, out of the amino acids that are in those proteins. And then secondly, what a lot of people don't think about it, they don't put together protein and detoxifying the body. And we use depending who you read, 6 or 7 different amino acids in the phase 2 process of detoxifying our livers. And so we'll often see, people that don't eat enough protein, they're going to have sluggish livers. They may have problems with, gallbladders. As a matter of fact, I just had a patient that was diagnosed. She's a vegan, and she was diagnosed with cancer. And she's like, how could this possibly happen? And one of the reasons potentially is that she just wasn't eating enough protein to help detox her liver.
Wow. So let's get back to a question that I guess I have sometimes and patients have, is the labeling behind organics, right? So there's concern that something might be labeled as organic, but it's not completely organic. What do you say about that, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's tough. I mean, there's always going to be people out there that are going to want to deceive, and really, if you can, in your area, there's a big push towards more locally grown foods. And so that, if you can know your farmer, and if you can really ask them the questions of, okay, so how long has it been since there haven't been pesticides and herbicides on the ground? It should be about 7 years or so to get actual certification. And then what do you use, what do you use at the beginning for herbicides and pesticides? What do you spray? What do you put on your vegetables? And, if they're honest and they're doing what they're doing, they are going to love to tell you what they do, because they're excited about it. It's what they do. They figured out that if they use certain plants, that it will stop the growth of other plants, and if they use certain plants, it will stop certain bugs from coming in. And so they use Mother Nature and co-create, if we want to use that thing again, with Mother Nature, this healthy harvest. And so it takes a little bit more time, but if you know the company that you buy the food from, or if you know the farmer, that's the best way to go. Otherwise, if you're getting it from Whole Foods or a chain like that, you pretty much just have to have faith that what they do, what they say they're doing, they're actually doing as far as background checks on the farmers.
I tell you what, when I first started buying, organic and from the farmer's market, I brought a giant, beautiful head of cabbage, or was it cabbage? No, it was cauliflower home, and I went to steam it, and there were caterpillars in it. I was like, oh my gosh! And my brother said, well, it's organic.
Right, that's right. Yeah, that's exactly right. And unfortunately, you'll see if you go to just a regular grocery store, if an apple has a bruise on it, people won't buy it. They expect perfection from their vegetables, and the reality is in nature it just doesn't look that way. They're kind of brown and they're kind of ugly, and it's kind of like a Charlie Brown Christmas tree, but but it's the real deal. It's what you actually want.
Yeah, I was just one of my first experiences, I was like, okay, well now I know what to expect, so I won't freak out anymore.
Right, yeah.
But,
whenever I pick mushrooms, I pick mushrooms in the spring, and I go out and I come back, and my wife kind of always leaves, because there's always they're just full of bugs. That's just part of the process.
Well, maybe you can pick them and she'll just eat them,
Yeah, that's exactly what happens.
So you were mentioning about gut health, right? And, the more I read, the more I'm convinced that the gut is so essential to all of our health, not just in terms of our weight, but in everything. So can you just elaborate more about gut health in general?
Sure. Yeah. How I try and teach my patients is, we're kind of shaped like a long, tall donut. If you think about a round donut and you think about that donut hole, it's still the hole is still the outside of the donut. It's still the brown crispy part, and if you open it, the white fluffy stuff's on the inside. So even though that hole looks like it's on the inside, it's still the outside of the donut. And that's the same with us. We're a long, tall donut. Actually, the hole that runs from top to bottom, no pun intended, is actually still the outside of our body, and that's why our body keeps most of the food that we eat there. We eat it, and most of it comes out the other end. And the reason why that is because it's covered with bacteria, it's covered with viruses, a lot of it can't be digested, and so we want it to come out the other end, and we don't want it to go into our body. So, the difference, so I always tell people that mucosal membrane that runs from top to bottom is, just like our skin. The only difference is it's only one cell wall thick. Our skin on the outside of our body is, depending on where it's at, 7 to 40 layers thick, and its job is to keep stuff out. Well, that's the way our mucosal membrane is too. Most of its job is to keep things out, and then it only very selectively, we want to absorb the nutrients that our bodies actually need. The problem is that if we're exposed to food that we're sensitive to over and over again, that sensitivity, almost an allergic reaction, tends to cause things to actually break down, that mucosal membrane to break down, and then we start getting holes in that membrane that's supposed to be nice and tight. We get holes, and we get that leaky gut syndrome. And now we can get things passing through that we're never supposed to pass through. And so that's the problem, is that now 70% of our immune response is within 2 inches of that tube that runs our gut, because it's just sitting there waiting for maybe a virus or a bacteria to jump in, and it's ready to pounce on it. Well, when you have that open gut wall, now you have a lot of things jumping in, and you have this hyperimmune response, this hyperinflammatory and hyperimmune response. And that's when we see people, their allergies get much worse. We start to see autoimmune diseases like arthritis, Hashimoto's, fibromyalgia, all sorts of things start to get worse because they're in this hyperimmune space, because all this stuff that's not supposed to be getting into the body is now getting into the body. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, absolutely. I love your showing of your hands, because I'm a visual person, so.
Yeah.
Okay, now, so you're saying that somebody who eats something that they're sensitive to will start to develop leaky gut syndrome, which presents as other problems in their life, such as asthma, arthritis, fibromyalgia, thyroid problems, etc. So how do you know that you might have a sensitivity to something, and then how do you fix it?
Right, yeah. Well, we do a lot of sensitivity testing. So I was just talking to 3 patients this morning before I started here. And it's a blood test. We use ALLATest as ALLATEST, I believe. And it's very inexpensive. They test the top 96 foods in the standard American diet, and I think the test is about $85, so it's very reasonable. You do have to get blood drawn, so like in our state, that has to be ordered by a physician or a chiropractor, and then we get a report back in about a week to see, okay, here's the 96 foods, and you're allergic, or you're sensitive, not allergic, to this many of these foods. And it's really quite remarkable. I just reviewed a test this morning that was one of my technician's sons, and he had 25. He has horrible asthma and horrible rhinitis, seasonal allergies. He goes to the hospital usually 2 to 3 times a year, and lo and behold, he came back with severe sensitivities to about 25 to 30 different foods. So we're immediately going to move him off of that. And typically where we start for most people, the two things that we really look for are vitamin D levels. Again, us being in the Midwest, most of my patients are either low or low normal in vitamin D, and vitamin D is essential for the making of that mucosal membrane. And so we want to make sure that that the vitamin D is in the upper half of what the normal level is. And
so
then
if somebody needs a supplement with vitamin D, what do you typically recommend as the dosage?
Well, you know, if for every 10 points that they want to raise their level, we recommend they take 1,000 units of vitamin D. So if somebody was, 50 points low, then we would recommend that they take 5,000 IUs of vitamin D a day. So
points low, that's really low.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's very, very common. We want, you know, the normal testing around here is between 30 and 100, and we want most people around 75. And I have so many patients that are in the 20s and teens, and even single digits. And so for most of my patients, we have them on between 3,000 and 6,000 IUs a day.
Wow. Okay, great. So you're talking about vitamin D, and you know, after you do the sensitivity test, you put them on vitamin D typically as well, and then you get rid of the foods that they're sensitive to.
Yep. And then usually we use something like L-glutamine, which is an amino acid that's used to help rebuild that GI wall lining. And if they're having a lot of GI problems, if they have like a lot of inflammatory problems in their GI, if they have IBS or irritable bowel syndrome, or if they have Crohn's disease, or they have a lot of GERD, then we'll often have them take a good anti-inflammatory, natural anti-inflammatory also, something like turmeric. It works really well. It stays in the gut pretty well. One product I really like is called Inflammacor, and that's by Orthomolecular, and that's a powder drink, and it has the L-glutamine in it, and it has the turmeric. Good, nice anti-inflammatories, helps calm the gut down, and then we add a little bit more vitamin D, and then typically for people, if they've had pretty severe allergies or asthma or GI problems, we typically keep them on that for about 6 to 9 months, somewhere in there. It's not something they have to take for the rest of their life, but the vitamin D they may take for the rest of their life.
Right. Well, depending on where they live. If they move to Florida, that might be different.
Right, yeah.
So, okay. Because I was just going to ask you with the turmeric, do you also ask patients to start incorporating it into their food prep? You know, maybe just cooking more with turmeric if they can, just to help with the inflammation?
Absolutely. I'm a big believer in spices. You know, I would love people to, really kind of vary from their standard American diet, and we recommend people go out and buy as many different, cooking books from around the world, because most cultures have really used spices, and I think that, there's quite a bit of good data out there on the healing property of spices, and there's a book by Eric Braverman called Younger Brain, Sharper Mind. And he actually goes into the different spices that work really well, and it's so my wife and I, we love to cook, and we cook literally a different culture's recipe virtually every night of the week.
That's awesome. I'm a foodie, so I love talking about food and how you can prepare different things using spices to help you achieve your health goals as well. So, okay, going back to food sensitivities, right? Now, if someone doesn't have access to a test like what you have in your pharmacy, Essential Wellness Pharmacy, can they just make some changes in their diet and see some changes in their health? Meaning, are there like the top 5, top 10 things that people generally are always sensitive to?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, remember I said I was old, remember? So the way we used to do this before we had these awesome tests were, you know, we would have people do, you know, some type of elimination diet. And you know, kind of the big ones that we look at are you know, dairy, red meat, egg yolks, sugar, and wheat. Those are kind of the big 5. And typically, if we have people go off of those, actually most people feel better when they go off of those. But though they can definitely show up pretty quickly for people. And so those are the big 5 that we know really cause a lot of inflammation and really cause the most problems for people. You know, the idea, you know, I think it's the last study I read said that full 60% of all human beings are actually lactose intolerant. You know, so it's, you know, it's 6 out of 10 people walking down the street. You know, now they don't get the symptomology, but that doesn't mean that they don't have the side effects. You know, and the potential increased inflammation in their gut.
Well, we call that subclinical, right? You know, you're not presenting necessarily with the symptoms, but you're still seeing the effects of it in other aspects of your life.
That's right, and unfortunately for a lot of people, you know, they'll have milk or they'll have some bread, and the effects won't show up that day. But you know, all of a sudden, you know, they eat or drink those things every day, and lo and behold, they start going, oh, you know, I have a sour stomach, or I have irritable bowel syndrome, or I have GERD, and you know, and they don't go, oh, I drink milk, therefore I have a problem. You know, they don't put those two together. And so that's the kind of the insidious nature of food sensitivities.
I don't know if you know J.J. Virgin. She just put a book out called The Virgin Diet, and she talks a lot about food sensitivities. And she mentioned the 5 that you talked about, but she also talks about soy and corn because they're highly GMO, you know, highly modified, and so a lot of people have problems with those products as well. So my next question is, if you're cutting those things out, then patients will ask, well, what do I eat then? You know, do I replace it with something, or do I just not eat those, or you know, how do I go from there?
Yeah, and you know, we direct people depending on what they like to eat. If they're omnivores, you know, we really try and move people towards, you know, a modified Mediterranean diet or a paleo diet, you know, something like that. And you know, I pretty much tell my patients the rules are pretty easy. If man made it, don't eat it. You know, if it's in a if it's in a bag or a box, if it's in a carton, cellophane, foil, if it's in a can, you know, don't buy it. You know, if Mother Nature or God, believing on, you know, whichever belief system you use, if it was made by Mother Nature, it's beautiful, it's colored, brightly colored, eat it. You know, the only thing we steer our patients away from are you know, our non-organic standard American beef, but you know, chicken, fish, turkey, you know, bison, venison, elk, you know, as far as meat sources, even lamb, those can be very good protein sources as far as meat. Egg whites are often pretty well tolerated by most people, and then all the veggies you want. You know, and we just, if it has the word sweet in it, other than sweet potatoes, just, you know, sweet corn, you know, those type of things, sweet peas, you know, carrots. If it's very, very sweet, you may want to stay away from those. It just depends on how you're feeling and if you want to lose weight along with this whole deal or not.
Mm-hmm. Or I mean, if it says sweet in the name, you can count it as your carbohydrate instead of your vegetable.
Absolutely, you're right.
Yeah. So okay. Gosh, I've got so many other questions for you. So as far as you mentioned with beef, right, the standard American diet, don't use regular beef. You want to get the, you know, free-range, organic, grass-fed beef. I've read that, but even with our chicken nowadays, in our fish, if they're farmed fish, and the way the chickens are raised in our society, you know, they're being fed corn, so the ratio of omega-6s to omega-3s, the bad fats to the good fats, is very off. So you're still better off trying to get the wild-caught, the organic chicken, wild-caught fish and organic chicken. You know, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I absolutely believe in that. If it, the problem with the mass production of food, especially in the United States, is that it's all about the bottom line as far as the dollar is concerned, and really, there was virtually no thought given to what goes into the chicken or the turkey, other than as long as it comes out and it tastes okay, and that's not really a good standard to follow. So we always try and push our patients towards either organic, free range grown, or wild caught is by far the best. And again, we're not pushing for people to eat lots and lots of animal protein, and so the hope is that if we eat smaller amounts of protein and as far as meat is concerned, then even with eating the wild caught, then it's a sustainable amount, that we won't overfish or overhunt the areas. So that's for around here. I'm a big believer in venison and those type of products and bison also, because it's very easy to get, and the meat is lean. They're never going to top it off with corn. So
yeah. I'll share a funny story with you. At the height of my healthy eating, I was considering raising my own chickens in the backyard.
Yeah. And you didn't do it?
No, I was like, well, I don't know if I can have the time to take care of them. But I was like, how can I guarantee that the chickens I'm buying are good chickens?
Yeah. I'm so lucky. I have a very good friend that's a veterinarian, and he raises his own chickens, and so I get chickens from him, and it's all they're all free range and fed really good food, and they taste so good. They're just absolutely amazing. It's just and they have nice little lives, and they live longer than than what normally would be, and then the circle of life goes on. So
yeah. Well, then, a quick question about that, because so you talked about egg yolks being highly sensitive, or people being sensitive to egg yolks, right? So if somebody got a farm fresh egg where the yolk is beautifully orange, is that typically okay to eat then, or stay away from that?
It just depends on the person, really. There's more likelihood that it would be okay for the person to eat. But if we think about what that sac is, it's basically an immunological transfer from the mother to the chick. The what's in there, that there is a potential for some sensitivities to it. It's just more reactive just because of the DNA that's actually in that yolk. Just similar to cow's milk. It's like it's just beyond me that we're the only animal on the face of the planet that milks another animal's breast milk and drinks it. It just doesn't make any sense at all. It's the most immunologically dense liquid that we can get, but the only problem is it's from another being. It's not from our species.
I guess that makes sense why we're so sensitive to it.
Yep.
So going back to, so what is a sensitivity versus an allergy? Can you define that a little bit for our audience here?
Yeah, it's a little bit complex, but the body will put out different immunoglobulins in response to the things that our bodies are exposed to. An allergic reaction is mediated by an IgE response, and a sensitivity reaction is mediated by an IgG response. And the IgE response tends to be much more pronounced, much more abrupt. It's something that we definitely want to pay. Your body will let you know if you eat something that you're allergic to. You're immediately going to get this response by the body. You're going to have potentially have a breakout, a rash, hives, to the point where it could be an anaphylactic shock, where we start to see the throat start to close down and things, and that's all the body really just kind of freaking out to this response. The IgG response, which is the food sensitivity, tends to be much milder. Now, you can sometimes get stomach aches and things like that, but they tend to show up more like, I have this constant dripping, post nasal drip. I never really kind of feel good. I'm tired all the time. It tends to be, the symptoms tend to be much more, less severe, and often can be thought of as just, oh, I have a cold, or I have these allergies, or my stomach's upset, or something like that.
Cool. No other questions on that point.
Okay.
So here's another question or concern patients have for me is, okay, well, I understand eating organic and eating healthy is good for me, but it costs so much more. What do you say to that?
Well, it's tough. I mean, there's different ways of getting organic food that it doesn't have to be outrageously expensive. Typically, if you go to farmers markets, if you join co-ops, other things like we've used a company for over a decade that's called Timber Creek Farms, and it's tcforganics.net. And we get, that's from Aurora, Illinois. They're based out of Aurora, Illinois. And we get 40, it's somewhere between 35 and 45 pounds of beautiful organic fresh vegetables and fruit delivered to our door every 2 weeks, and it's about $37. I mean, it's just an amazingly good deal. And there are more and more of those out there. Now that's
it's the CSA, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. So you actually, you can look around. It does take more time, and there are better deals. And then the other thing is, is on the back end is that, if you're going to spend money on anything, spend it on your food. If there's anything you can spend money on, spend it on your food and your vitamins, because those are the things that are going to actually help keep you well. And so that's in the long run, it's going to be less expensive to spend the money on the food. Going to I've noticed going to some of the big national retailers that are very famous for having organic food, it's outrageously priced, and it's very tough to buy, a shopping cart full of food there, So, and even if you have to pick and choose, you don't have to get all your food organic, but I would definitely, as far as the fresh fruits and vegetables and the meats, I would go down that road for sure.
Okay. I think what they call around here, it's called CSA, like Community Supported Agriculture, and it's where the farms deliver to you every 2 weeks. Now, do they continue to deliver that over the winter time as well?
They do, actually, yeah. They have greenhouses, and most of them are root vegetables. So we eat a lot of turnips and different things like that all throughout the winter. But they're wonderful, and I've got a bunch of great recipes for them, But yeah, it's totally doable year long, and many of those companies have really done a great job of finding great sources of truly organic food that they can keep going for a year-round production. So now some of the co-ops here in town, it's pretty much just spring to fall. But a company like Timber Creek Farms, they have it year-round.
Okay. As far as going back to gut health, right, you mentioned that's important, and there's more talk about detoxing and how that's essential for gut health as well. Can you elaborate on just the importance of a regular detox program and what a detox program would look like?
Yeah, well, I'm doing one right now. As we speak, I am detoxing. Can you tell? So I do 2 detoxes a year, kind of a spring cleaning, which I'm doing a little bit earlier because I'm doing it with a bunch of my patients, and then I do one in the fall also. And the basics to detox, it just depends on what you want to detox. I'm a big believer in as long as your gut is working well, we never have people start detoxing unless they're having regular bowel movements. And that's one thing we always make sure of first, is that they're having regular bowel movements, because a lot of the toxins are going to be coming out through the bile duct, through the gallbladder and going into the feces. So we want to make sure that they're regular. And we want to make sure that they're drinking lots of water. And I tell my patients, I want you peeing, pooing, and sweating. That's what we want. So and if we don't have those excretionary pathways open, then I don't want you to detox. The last thing we want you to do is liberate a bunch of toxins and have nowhere to go with them. So the couple of things that I really try and stress to my patients are, I like to do a liver detox. That's what I'm doing right now, once a year. I think it's a great idea. Our livers are inundated. Our livers, its main job is to clean the blood and get a lot of the toxins and hormones and all those things out of our body, herbicides and pesticides and chemicals. And our poor little livers are just over inundated every day with literally every breath that we take. And so, I just think it's a great idea to detox that liver once a year. And so that's what I'm doing now. We use certain products. I use a product called Core Restore from Orthomolecular that I like a lot. I use a few different products. But that's the one I'm doing right now, and it's set up as a 7-day detox that if you're feeling great and you're doing wonderful and you want to keep doing it, you can actually repeat it over and over again up to 28 days. And the nice thing about that is it comes with a protein drink, because remember I said that that having protein, those amino acids are absolutely essential for that phase 2 detoxification of the liver. And so I like this one because it, in essence, forces people to eat protein twice a day. So we make sure that if we are starting to get those toxins out, that the liver can then package them up and get rid of them. So we do that once a year as far as the liver detox. And then the other thing I wanted to mention real quickly about that, if you have patients that, if they come and see your show and they just naturally start to lose weight, we do a lot of weight loss with people, natural weight loss, is that don't forget that there's a lot of toxins that are stored in our fat cells. And so we'll often see when the liver gets over inundated, it doesn't know what to do with those toxins. So it sets it up so it sequesters those toxins in the fat cells to kind of hide them away so they're no longer, harming the body. Well, when people start to lose those fat cells, when they start to break those fat cells down, what happens is your body starts releasing those toxins back out into the bloodstream. And what we'll see is people will hit a plateau, they'll lose 20, 25 pounds, and all of a sudden they'll hit this plateau and they can't lose any more weight. Well, that's more than likely, that's those toxins being released. A lot of them, like the herbicides and pesticides that we use, are called xenoestrogens. And estrogen, one of the messages estrogens and xenoestrogens, the herbicides and pesticides, tell our body is hold on to fat and water because you might get pregnant. Well, once you release all those xenoestrogens, your body stops losing weight, and these people hit a plateau. So we immediately have them do a liver detox, and they detox, and lo and behold, they can start losing weight again. Wow. So it's pretty neat. So that liver detox is super important. I think it's great. And then the second detox I do is just a whole body detox. I do what's called the Master Cleanse or the Lemonade Diet, and I use organic lemons and grade B maple syrup and a little cayenne pepper, and that's all I eat or drink for usually about 4 days, is as far as I can make it, 4 or 5 days. I have a buddy that makes it 28 days, but I can't do that. So, yeah. So
is it a competition?
No. It's with the grade B maple syrup, it's pretty sweet. It tastes like really good lemonade. But I'm just not a sweet guy. I kind of like bitter stuff. So, if there could be a beer master cleanse, I would do awesome at it. So, but I do that one. One, just because it's a great total cleanse. It really, if you're not eating, it really cleanses out the gut. And then lastly, for me, it's kind of a time of renewal for myself, for spiritual renewal. It's time for me to be quiet, to be reflective, to, think about the past year and think about the future year. So it's really kind of a whole mind, body, spirit thing for me. And I really try and get away for 4 days and do that each year. So.
Well, so you said your buddy did it for 28. What do you typically recommend people do it for?
I think usually, typically, especially if it's your first time, no more than 7 days. It's I think that's a good time, and when you do that one, typically we have people do gastric lavages. Also, we have them drink some salt water to make sure that their bowels keep regular, because you will be expelling toxins throughout the 5 to 7 days, and then slowly, once they're done, they've made the decision. Okay, I'm going to go back. Then we actually teach them to integrate food very slowly and start with broths, vegetable broths and things like that, and move back slowly, not go from a lemonade diet to going and getting a burger and fries or something like that.
Sure. And what kind of maple syrup did you say?
It's called grade B maple syrup. And you can get it at most health food stores. Okay. And it'll actually say maple syrup grade B right on there, and it has a lot of trace minerals in it, so it works out really well. Between the lemons and the grade B maple syrup, you really have most of the nutrients you need to sustain you for quite a while.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so as far as somebody who is on medications, right? The liver does a lot in terms of metabolizing the medications properly. So if someone is on a lot of medications, do you recommend they do a liver detox more frequently than once a year?
Well, it just depends. We always talk, have a long talk with our patients that are on a lot of meds that want to do liver detoxes, because we actually have to watch their meds. If they're on meds that are highly cleared through the liver, that have a very small therapeutic window, if they're on anticonvulsants and things like that, we really kind of walk them through that process to make sure that they're going to have a safe journey through the detox. If I think it's a good idea if they're on a lot of meds to do a liver detox twice a year, but I think they need a partner in that, and they should find somebody that's very familiar with liver detoxing, and preferably somebody that really knows a lot about medicine, so a pharmacist would be awesome, and then tread lightly and watch and be willing to be adaptive through the process also.
Mm-hmm. So, and then you were talking about how protein is so important in the detox process, I think it was, and in losing weight, if somebody is plateauing, to have some protein, right? Did I get that right?
Well, they can have protein, but yeah, they just want to make sure. We want to make sure that if they've lost a lot of weight, that we actually do a detox for them for sure. So, and protein's great for that. Omega-3 fatty acids are great for that, and then other herbs and things that we use to actually help clear the liver, like milk thistle and things like that, can really help.
So, can you eat the protein, or does it have to be a supplement?
Nope, you can eat it. You can eat meat. You can eat the protein from vegetable sources. That's fine too. We typically, to properly detox, we want to make sure that you're getting at least 30 grams of protein a day. Mm-hmm. I'm a big believer in protein. I think people just feel better when they're taking protein. So, for me, it's not uncommon for me to have people do 70, 90 grams of protein a day, which is more than what the average American typically eats. We tend to be very high in carbohydrates,
Yes. Well, and when people eat more protein, they feel fuller longer, and honestly, you are able to lose weight easier on a higher protein diet.
Absolutely.
Okay, and you talked about, real quick, who pooping, right? And this is something I've become more interested in lately because, you know, when I was eating healthy, I was starting to have a regular bowel movement. I know this is probably too much information, but my trainer and I got into this conversation about, he's like, well, theoretically, if you're eating really healthy, you should be having a bowel movement every time you eat. You know, what is the normal amount of time to be having a bowel movement in a day, would you say?
Well, it's, you know, the last, you know, when I went through school, and I've read this again since then, but, you know, it was anywhere from 3 times a week to 3 times a day, you know, so, and so, you know, that anywhere in there is fine. I think, personally, I think people feel better if they're regular, if they have a bowel movement every day, at least one every day, but one every day. And, you know, and for most of my patients, a lot of that has to do with their liquid intake, with how much water they're actually drinking. You know, we can be dehydrated so easily, and you know, and if you look at how many Starbucks, you know, coffee places there are, you know, and all that caffeine that's out there, and all those kids that are, you know, drinking the amps and all those caffeinated drinks, you know, that caffeine's going to cause them to diurese. It's going to cause them to lose water, and they're going to end up, as normal, they're going to end up, you know, dehydrated. And you know, that's one thing that we watch very closely. So we really stress that people drink lots and lots of water. And I love using, you know, one of my favorite minerals, one of my favorite vitamin minerals overall is magnesium glycinate. I love magnesium. It's used in over 300 enzymatic processes in the body, and wherever magnesium goes, water follows. So, you know, we typically have people, I like magnesium glycinate because it usually causes people to have, you know, soft, normal stools. Magnesium oxide that's out there, like Magox, that's, you know, a mass-produced product, it can cause diarrhea, you know, and if you take too much of it, and that's a fine line to walk. But the magnesium glycinate both gets absorbed into the body and works, and some of it stays in the GI tract and really acts as a natural stool softener.
Okay. I was just going to ask you why the glycinate over the other, you know, the citrate or the oxide, but you just answered that.
Yeah.
So, okay, one more question about bowel movements, I promise.
That's all right. I'll talk all day if you want.
I have elderly patients who, you know, because they think they're supposed to have a bowel movement every day, you know, they're coming to the pharmacy every other day to buy Senna or Docusate, you know, and I just don't think that's good for them. And I'm trying to get them to drink more water, increase their fiber, but, I mean, is that healthy? I just, you know, I don't think it is, but what's your thought on that?
I don't think it is either. You know, that's one of the problems, and that's kind of why I sneak the magnesium glycinate in, because, you know, magnesium and calcium are called the sedative minerals. You know, so they, you know, if you talk to the old, you know, to your older patients, and you can ask them, hey, do you sleep very well? And almost all of them will say, oh, I wake up 6 times a night, and you know, and you can say, hey, if you use this magnesium glycinate, that's actually what I use for sleep. Is that typically people sleep much deeper. They really sleep a lot deeper. If they have aches and pains, it really helps with that. If they have headaches, I mean, it's phenomenal for migraine headaches. And then when they wake up, they have a bowel movement. You know, so it's like this magic trifecta. Their pain goes away, they sleep well, and they poop. You know, so it's just great.
That's a sneaky way to get it in, but I like it.
I know. I'm a sneaky guy sometimes. And you know, and what you're saying is absolutely true. You know, it really is. You know, the fiber. The key is fiber and water. It is, and our you know, our bowels are supposed to work. But, you know, sometimes, like you said, patients get so fixated on, I have to have this bowel movement, I have to have this bowel movement, you know. And the other thing that's kind of missed often in that process is exercise. You know, if we get their bodies moving, if we get them scrunching up their guts, you know, and that will actually help propel and mix up that food that, you know, that's become stool in their bowels, and they'll actually, you know, have more regular bowel movements. supplements. And so, that's the only other thing I can think of. Is I have them exercising quite a bit too.
Awesome. Well, I guess I wanted to have you share real quick some stories of the patients that you've been able to help with diet, how they've been able to feel better or maybe even come off of some of their medications, because the show is really about, the basics, the nutrition and having that as a foundation for good health. So, I want to share some stories from your experience, because I think that people need to hear that more, that it does work as long as you stick to it.
Yep. I have two that come to mind right away. One, I had a woman call me up and said, "Hey, can you see my sister? I do consultations, for 2.5 days a week, and can I bring my sister?" And I said, "Sure, absolutely." And she said, "Well, she's not going to be feeling very good when I bring her in." And I said, "That's okay. That happens a lot." So these two women came in, and one woman was dressed normally, and the other woman was in a house coat. Her hair was not done. She had no makeup on. And as a woman, I'm sure you understand that that's a red flag clinically. That's not a typical woman. That comes to a store. I'm just we're just a little store. And this woman had been diagnosed as agoraphobic. She was diagnosed as afraid to go outside, and she lives across the river in a different town from Peoria, where I live. And she had not been across the river in 2.5 years, and she hadn't been out of her house for over 3 months. And so we started talking, and I always start with the gut. And what do you eat? And so we just started talking about her diet and what she did eat, and her food intake was poor and then got progressively worse because her husband was doing the shopping. So it was all canned stuff and pre-made stuff and just super high carbohydrates, everything out of bags and boxes, basically. And so I started her on some good basic vitamins and some good, really good pure fish oil. But what I started her on was a high protein diet. And I gave her digestive enzymes to make sure that she digested those proteins. So about 3 weeks later, and this was just about 3 or 4 months ago, 3 weeks later, this woman comes in. She says, "Hey, I wanted to come in and talk to you. I just really wanted to thank you." And I said, "Oh, that's great. And I don't, we have a pretty busy practice, and I don't remember everybody, And she's like, "You don't remember me, do you?" And I was like, "No." She's like, "Well, I'm so-and-so. I'm the person you saw 3 weeks ago." And I said, and I still didn't click. And she said, "I'm from across the river.
Wow.
I drove myself here today." Her sister had blindfolded her and drove her to the meeting, to the consultation with me.
Wow.
And the next time I saw her, she was driving her own car. And all we did was give her some vitamins and some fish oil, a high-protein diet, and some digestive enzymes. And, we both cried together. It was an amazing process. It was just, I just could not believe it. Here she was, makeup perfectly done, hair perfectly done, beautiful dress. Her life was back, and it was in the process of getting off all of her psychotropic meds, because her doctor realized that she no longer needed to be on them. So I cautioned her that if she did start feeling better, not to stop those right away, but to wean off those slowly.
Yes.
So that's one. You want another one? You got time?
Of course, I love these.
I had, this was about a year ago, I had, this was another woman called for another one. She said, I need you to see my daughter. And I said, okay. And she said, she's seen all these allergists, and she's 19, and she's just had this horrible time for 6 years since she was 13 years old. She's missed a ton of school. Would you please see her? I hear you're the guy to talk to. I was like, okay. So we set up a time. This young woman came in. She was 19, very pretty, but her face was horribly swollen. Her lips were swollen. It literally looked like somebody had beaten her. She wasn't bruised, but her face was totally swollen and distorted. And I could tell that she was this beautiful woman, and I have a 19-year-old daughter, right? So it's like, so I mean, it hit me right in the heart. And so with her is, so she's a nursing student. The young woman is a nursing student. Her mom is with her, that's a nurse. Her sister is with her, that's a nurse. And her grandmother was with her, who is a nurse. And I thought, oh boy, I better bring my A game today, So we all sat down kind of like in this, semicircle. And she had sent me her chart, and her chart was about that thick, and I'd gone through it all. And she'd seen 6 allergists and all specialists. She'd been to Mayo, she'd been to Iowa. I mean, all sorts of specialists. And I started flipping through it, and her mother said, you're the first person that's ever read this before we showed up. I was like, well, because I had it all marked and highlighted and stuff. I said, well, we want to make the best use of your time, and I know that the answer's in here. And I said, I know your problem, and I said, you have a food, and and her mother said, don't you say a food allergy, and because she'd been tested so many times. I said, you don't have a food allergy, you have a food sensitivity, and it's very severe. So we moved quickly. I started her on an elimination diet because she was obviously having problems that day. But this is a young woman that had missed so much school, and it was just heartbreaking. Trying to make it through high school is hard enough for most kids, and then looking like that day in and day out, or every third week, never knowing when it's going to happen. It just had ruined a good portion of her life. So we started on an elimination diet, and we did a food sensitivity test. She immediately started getting better on the elimination diet, and she came back highly, highly sensitive to dairy, and even dairy that had been cooked. So the day before I saw her, she had had brownies, and that's what had triggered it. But nobody could, there was nowhere to point the finger. So within 2 weeks, she was completely clear. That's been over a year ago now, and she's never had a single reoccurrence of this happening to her. So we healed her gut. We gave her vitamin D. We gave her L-glutamine. We did all those things to make sure that we would lessen her food sensitivities. But the big thing is that the symptoms stopped immediately.
That's awesome. Oh my gosh. It gives me goosebumps listening to these stories. It's because how much you've impacted their lives. Well, I'm certainly so glad that you spent the time to come here and share your expertise with us, Jeff. And we're just about out of time, but why don't you tell the people here, what you're working on and how they can find out more about you, because you've got a great practice going. Yeah,
thanks. You can find us on the web at essentialwellnesspharmacy.com. That's great. You can also call us. We're in Peoria, Illinois. Our number is 309-681-8850. So either way is fine. I'll get the message, and if we can help with anything, just feel free to call. We're here to serve. So.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time and for coming on the show. And you take care now, okay?
Great. Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure.
Hey, so I hope you enjoyed the show. That was Jeff Robbins from the Essential Wellness Pharmacy. All the links and resources mentioned today are in the show notes at drAnn.com/008. And Ann is spelled A-N-H as in helpful. While you're there, remember to jump on the Food as Medicine VIP email list, and you'll get my free gift, the Clean Eating Rules. It's everything that I learned about nutrition when I was on my bodybuilding journey, and it's my #1 guide for how to eat to lose weight, improve your biometrics, and get more energy. And you can get it for free at drAnn.com. You'll also get my favorite pearls from the show when you hop on the email list. This show can be a little bit technical and detail-oriented at times when the guests share their protocols about what to eat, what foods to avoid, which supplements to take, etc. And if you're anything like me, you're probably listening to this while you're driving, you're cooking, you're running some errands around the house, and you really don't have time to be jotting down notes of all the great information that's shared during the episode. So I've taken the notes for you, and by hopping on my email list, you'll get the show pearls delivered right to your inbox so you can refer back to them at any time. Finally, as a VIP email subscriber, you'll get the occasional love letters from me, which are emails sharing some of my favorite recipes and products, upcoming events, new information I've learned, and other goodies. So go to drann.com and enter your name and email address. Did you like this episode? Then leave a review and tell your friends, because the world needs to hear the food as medicine message. We've got plenty of great guests coming up, so stay tuned. Thanks so much for stopping by, and until next time, remember to eat consciously, because the world needs a healthy and vibrant you. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe to this channel and share it with your friends, because we need more people to hear the food as medicine message. And make sure to head over to drann.com and sign up for free updates, because I share some insights in my email updates that I don't share anywhere else. And before you go, don't forget to leave a comment, because I absolutely love hearing from you.